So, in case you haven't heard, there is a potentially enormous reform that could be happening in Nebraska in the next couple of weeks that could determine the outcome of the entire election in November. Nebraska has a pretty interesting and pretty rare approach to presidential elections. It's something it shares only with Maine, and that is that those two states give out their electoral votes in a somewhat proportional way. Both states immediately give to the winner of their statewide vote the two electoral votes that they get from their senators, and then the ones for the House of Representatives they give out based on who wins those congressional districts. What that essentially means is that the states aren't like single party when it comes to these elections. In Nebraska, for example, there's one congressional district where Democrats can win, so that means that they normally win one of the electoral votes from Nebraska. And vice versa, the Republicans have an ability to win one electoral vote from Maine's second district. Now, it normally doesn't matter that much in American politics because, at least in presidential elections, it's not coming down to one electoral vote from one of these two states swinging the entire thing. But in this election, that could be a pretty big deal. This is from 270 to win, great resource if you want to look at potential outcomes for the presidential election. But this is Harris's simplest path to victory. If she wins in the Rust Belt, if she wins in Wisconsin, Michigan, and then in Pennsylvania, she gets to 270. If she gets that one electoral vote from Nebraska. So assuming Harris loses everywhere else, she doesn't carry Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, or North Carolina, she just gets those three states, and then you take away Nebraska's one electoral vote, that is a deadlock. 269 to 269, a tie in the Electoral College. Now, the Constitution has a way to deal with that in this situation, and it's happened twice before, very early in America's history, is that if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives, voting as states, then get to pick the president. And that would easily go in Trump's favor if it came down to a House vote. It's essentially guaranteed that in a 269 tie, that Trump will become the president. Now, in that Nebraska congressional district where Democrats have a chance, Harris is polling quite ahead. So it's almost a certainty that she's going to win one vote from Nebraska. Under this system, if it's still around, Trump and the Republican Party are currently organizing to see if they can have a last-minute change to get a special session of the Nebraska legislature to come together and to reform the system so that all electoral votes will go to whoever wins the state as a whole, like the other 48 states do. This is a system that Nebraska has had since the early 1990s. In the last 50 days of this campaign, they are trying to reform 30 years of political norm so that they can make a deadlock that is to their advantage slightly more likely. So they're currently in negotiations at the moment. I think Senator Lindsey Graham is out there now trying to convince people to do this because they have the numbers in Nebraska's legislature to do this, but only just. They need every single Republican at a state legislative level to agree to do this. The first thing you might ask is, will Maine respond? Because Maine is a very Democratic state, but it has the ability to send one elector to the Republican side. Well, that's where the really scummy bit comes out. The reason that Nebraska have left this so late is because it's too late for Maine to change their rules. Maine and Nebraska basically had this sort of mutually assured destruction relationship going on, where if one state reformed its laws, then the other would respond, and then it would just be a neutral game. It would have no benefit, because the one you would pick up in Nebraska as a Republican, you would then lose when Maine responded and changed their laws. Maine could try to do something, but realistically, considering the fact that Democrats are in control in Maine, but they don't have a massive majority akin to what the Republicans have in Nebraska, so there's no guarantee whatsoever. It's in fact very unlikely that Maine is going to have any ability to respond to this. I think the reason this is so shocking and off-putting is that there was an agreement at hand, like a non-spoken agreement that was, we will have a Democratic state and a Republican state give more representation to political minorities in their states. Republicans could get representation in Maine, and subsequently, Democrats could get political representation in Nebraska. That agreement has been thrown to hell. If Nebraska does this and goes winner take all, like the other 48 states, then you can guarantee that Maine will respond in kind, and after this election, they will go to winner take all. I literally just made a video about how proportional systems, sort of akin to what Nebraska and Maine do, are kind of like shining examples of how the Electoral College can work better. Stop having set solid blue or solid red states that can't have political representation for people that aren't the majority. Those two states are a perfect example of how to do it better. And Republicans have just thrown that all in the trash. Now, there are some Republican holdouts from what I've read in Nebraska, maybe like one or two, who still aren't really on board with the idea of changing this close. And I don't know how long they hold out, but like, fingers crossed that they do stick to their guns somehow. Republicans are pretty sick of this like idea that Democrats perpetuate that they're threats to democracy. But if in like the last 2 months of an election, you reform one of the best systems for ensuring that political voices are heard, specifically just in favor of your party, where the other state, Maine, didn't do that, where Democrats acted in good faith, assuming that Nebraskans would do the same, then maybe you should consider that the other side actually has a point.